Hell with it. You can't fix it. Ah. Good evening, everyone. My name is Karleigh Webb, and from all of us at the New Haven Pride Center, good evening for Trans Talk, a conversation with Chris Mosier. I've been in sports journalism for 26 years. I've met champions from the sidelines to the starting lines, through the finish lines, in the victory lanes, and in the locker rooms. But the person that you're meeting tonight is not just someone who is a champion on the field and great on the field. They're known for being good and great off of it as well. And they are a person I consider a hero. Chris Mosier has spent an athlete's life doing what athletes do, picking up wins. The Chicago native is a 6-time world champion qualifier in the duathlon for the USA national team. In 2015, he became the first known transgender man to represent the United States in international competition. He's also a 2-time national champion and the first transgender athlete to compete in a U.S. Olympic trials in any sport where they competed in the gender by which they identify. And it is my distinct honor to welcome him to our forum tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chris Mosier.
Hello, everyone.
Chris, from all of us at the New Haven Pride Center, thank you for joining us tonight and welcome.
Thank you so much. Super excited to be here, especially to talk to you. Thank you for that warm welcome and beautiful
to talk to me. To talk to me. No, this is an honor to talk to you. Now, a couple housekeeping notes before we begin. To all of you in our audience tonight, this is not just a conversation between myself and Chris. This is a conversation between our community. And we want this to be interactive. So if you have something you want to say or something that you want to ask as we're having this conversation, please comment, send it through. We've got the wonderful and great Patrick Dunn in the back looking at all the questions. He's going to beam it up to us, and we're going to get to it, and we'll try and get to as many as we can in the hour that we have. But Chris, first, I want to talk about what's happening. I want to talk about that Olympic trials experience. What was that like for you at the 50K race walk trials back in February to toe that starting line and take that start?
I think that's a great place to start. It was incredible. It was an athletic highlight for sure. And it was a little bit surreal, to be honest. We, know that in the past, it's been 19 years since transgender people have been allowed to participate in the Olympics with a policy that no trans athletes have made it to the Olympics. And so my participation in the trials was really the closest that anyone has gotten so far. It was breaking a barrier in that regard. You have to say I went in with a little bit of disappointment, honestly, because I had been suffering from knee injuries. And as you know, I pulled out of the Olympic trial race with a torn meniscus in my right knee. So a painful injury and a sad way to end that race, but such an incredible experience to be there. And really, I'm just, so proud to have had that experience and to have been in that position as that part of history.
Now, by the way, how is that knee?
The knee, really interesting. Probably the only benefit of COVID times here has been that I had no rush, no unnecessary sort of barriers in my recovery from my knee injury. So basically, I opted not to have surgery. I was hoping that I could rehab it and then be ready for my national championship, my world championship race, and all of the things that I had scheduled this year, when this was happening in January. So I thought that I could strengthen it and was a little worried about recovery from surgery. Chose to just do the strength part and not the surgery. And I had, all of this extra time to really make it super strong. So my leg now is feeling awesome. My cardio, not so much, but I'm feeling really, really strong. And I think if you watch any of my stories on Instagram, you see I'm doing some really wild stuff with a lot of weight on these legs. And I think that I'm going to set myself up for a better season the next chance that we have to get back to racing, whatever that looks like.
Oh, by the way, I was stealing some of those leg exercises that you're doing on Instagram. So
Yeah,
I mean, I've been stealing a few of them because the season never stops, even if there's not races. Now, for yourself, I mean, now having looked back on it and having 6 months or so of distance away from it, what's your thoughts on that experience after being away from it from a time? How do you see it now?
I'm just so incredibly proud to have been there, to have shared that moment. Particularly, it was really meaningful for me because I have a friend named Pablo who is the number 5 race walker in the country, Pablo Gomez, and he's the guy who got me into race walking. And he was there competing as well. He finished quite well. I think he finished in 5th place. And it was really special for me to be there to start that race with him because he started me on this journey, and he's been so supportive ever since I started to walk, race walk. And then as I pulled out of the race, it was great to be able to be his support crew, to then cheer and encourage him and help him across the finish line. So yeah, it just in terms of community was really special. In terms of that moment for trans history and for LGBTQ history was really special. And then personally as an athlete, like, to have the medal that says Olympic trials is just like, it's incredible.
Now, one thing that you were doing in addition, and by the way, before we continue, we have another athlete in this house tonight, and that's Nicholas Michu doing the ASL interpretation tonight. And by the way, I have to understand this is the first time we've had an ASL interpreter for one of these events, and this is a big deal for us. So Nicholas, keep those hands flying. We're going to have some fun this next hour. Now, but Chris, back to you. In addition to getting ready for the Olympic trials and making history there, you've also been a part of the history in regards to your activism. You traveled to Arizona, you traveled to Idaho, you're here in Connecticut now. You've been in front of TV cameras, you've been quoted from major newspapers across this country on and through your work with transathlete.com. You've been in the thick of this fight. What keeps you doing the activism that you're doing in addition to being a high-level athlete?
It's actually the same thing that got me into it in the first place, which is I want to make the experience easier and better for every athlete that comes after me. When I transitioned in 2010, there weren't policies in the books for most sports. And so when I was trying to transition categories in my running races, in my triathlons, basically I had to send a message to someone at an organization and just hope it was the right person. And then they inevitably forwarded my email to 8 of their colleagues and said, I don't know who this goes to, who then would forward it on to other people. And before I knew it, I was outing myself to 20, 30, 40 people at an organization, just searching for answers, searching for a place to participate, and jumping through all of those hoops was tiresome. I could see if I wasn't so incredibly dedicated to making sure that I pushed through that wall, it would have been very easy to just say, you know what, this is too much work to play sports. Like, it's just not worth it. And so when I think about that experience that I had, that's the reason why I made transathlete.com. That's the reason why I feel it's so important to speak up specifically for youth, for the young people, for high schoolers, even for college athletes, for our recreational athletes. Just know that every person deserves access to sport. And I think it's just so incredibly important. And there shouldn't be these hoops. They shouldn't be these barriers that people have to jump over or jump through to just participate with their peers. And so that's really what motivates me to continue to do this work.
Now, we've had some fights, like I said before, and you, for example, how did it feel for you to see that the preliminary hearings in Idaho in HB 500 went toward inclusion and away from exclusion?
Oh, you know what? Idaho is such a challenging one for me because, as you mentioned before, I did go to Idaho. I did meet with lawmakers, and I did spend time with the people on the ground there who were doing this work. who were showing up every single day at the Capitol to do their testimony, to put themselves out in front of lawmakers and share their truth, share their stories, share how they're an ally and share what they think. And when I was there, it was just so heartbreaking to see the people put themselves out there like that. Don't get me wrong, it was motivating and it was encouraging too. And it was really special to be there to share the time with them and to help elevate their voices. But I just saw how much emotional labor went into the work that they were doing. And you're right, in the lead up to that, it did seem like it was mostly that, that people, and even the governor had said, like, I'm not a discrimination guy, right? Like, we thought that this was going to go a different way. And it was obviously a lot of sadness because the law was passed the day before Trans Day of Visibility. So it's an extra sort of gut punch to us. But, the amount of work that people were doing there is just so incredible and motivating and inspiring. And also to know just how challenging it is for us as trans people to put ourselves out there like that every single day. I'll just share with you, one of the most heartbreaking things for me was seeing young people. And there was someone who was in 8th grade, there were some high school students, and there was a college student who identified as trans who were there. And they were listening to lawmakers misgender them, to say that they don't belong in school sports, that they shouldn't have the same opportunities as their peers. And then also at the same time, this sort of conversation about birth certificates was also going on. So essentially they were saying, like, we don't deserve to be in public. We don't deserve the same basic human rights as our peers. And to see young people hear that day after day after day was just really, really upsetting and, sort of soul crushing to think about what their experiences is of having people say that they don't belong on this earth,
One thing I've seen you do a great deal on is on your Twitter. Yes, we follow each other on Twitter.
Yeah.
And what is it like? Because I know what it's like for me. Quite frankly, there's a lot of people who are on Twitter who honestly you want to drop a long hype from a short peer. And how do you continue to try and cast that light and shine your light positively in the middle of that?
Karleigh, I feel like you and I have different approaches, though. I feel like you will get into it. You are just like straight up rolling up the sleeves, and I think this is the difference, right? Is that I tend not to reply to folks who I know that I cannot move, where you find sport in that. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like you ride your bike and you also have like the sport of battling trolls. And I think that's just like part of what you do.
Me?
Am I right?
Me battle trolls. Nah. In the beginning I did, but I've taken a lot more of your approach because I see what you do.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, can you actually talk some people to the other side, to the inclusion side? Have you been able to do it?
Oh, absolutely. And, I think you can't move everybody. So here's the thing, right? Especially, first of all, I mean, let's just acknowledge first that it's ridiculous that our identities are up for debate, right?
One more time, amen. One more time for the people in the back.
Yes. So it is ridiculous that our identities are a point of debate, and we know that we're going to see this more and more and more this election cycle. Transgender people and trans athletes are a divisive wedge issue, as they call it, in the political election cycle. And we've seen that people are using our identities as a way to try to split voters to, get them on one side or the other. And you and I know this from our experience, not just on Twitter, but in any media capacity, that when people are talking about transgender athletes, if they've never met a trans person before in their entire life, if they hate sports, if they have no skin in the game at all, they still have a very strong opinion about transgender people in sports. And so it's just one of these things that people can go from a 0 to an 11 right, at the snap of a finger when you start to talk about transgender athletes. So my approach, as you mentioned, like on Twitter, is mostly, I learned this in New York, and this was like my safety mechanism when I was in New York, and I was interacting with people, and I had, so many cases in New York of people like yelling things at me from cars. I would ride my bike, commute by bike, throw things out their window at me. I had a guy throw a lit cigarette, at me and landed on in the crease of my arm, people just doing all sorts of stuff. And my response to them would typically be to like wink and blow a kiss at them, especially when I was riding my bike in traffic. So if they would call me an anti-gay slur or an anti-trans slur, that I would look at them and just smile and blow them a kiss, and it would just send them through the roof of their car. I mean, it just makes people more angry when you don't feed into their trolling, right? And so that's the Twitter approach that I take also, is just to like try to be empathetic and try to be kind and just go, wow, if somebody takes the time out of their day to say that stuff to me, to come to my page, like you took the time to find my page, my post, and then to write some really horrible stuff, and that person must be hurting, right? So like, that's the approach that I take. And then, I've had people turn around in my DMs and say that they've learned a lot from listening to me, that they appreciate the way that I talk. Like, I just try to give people a chance to, I think a lot of people are scared. A lot of people don't know. So there's a real lack of education around our identities. And if all you're hearing is that we're monsters and that we don't deserve to be able to use the restroom and that we're going to hurt your children and like all of these things, as ridiculous as those things are, if that's all you're hearing, then you're not going to know how to interact with me when you meet me, or online. So that's the approach that I try to take. And just, I find that for me, it's better for my mental health too.
That's true. Facts.
I can get really, really stressed out. And there are times where I just have to be like logging off. I'm pushing it all away. I need to take a break. And a lot of times this happens when there are news stories of like, Black trans women being murdered, multiple people in a week, right? Like, I mean, it is a lot to take in. And when we have situations like this, like there are times that we just have to unplug, because I know that I can't engage with people from that place of kindness and love and respect that I want to.
I want to throw a name at you, because I promised our head of transgender programming here at the Pride Center, Lindsay Pembroke, this. I want to throw a name at you. Give me whatever comes to your mind. J.K. Rowling.
Who? She's not worth my time. I mean, I think it's really, well, first of all, I've never read the books. I've never seen the movies. If you can believe that, I really haven't. I was just never into it. There are people out there who will just try to push buttons. And when they have been proven to be wrong, they will double down on their wrong stance, right? And, I think, so that's part of the camp of people who I don't think that I can move. I'm not trying to sit down with J.K. Rowling and have a conversation with her. And I did try to with Martina, right? So like
How did that go?
Well, it didn't happen, right? Like there was no interest to have a conversation with me.
Would you want to have that conversation?
Now, no, but initially when the first stuff came out, and just for context for everybody listening, if you don't know, Martina Navratilova has written some really horrible anti-trans women and anti-trans athlete articles that have been actually cited by the folks in Idaho, by the folks in Connecticut in these lawsuits that are happening. People still look to her as a queer icon. And so, for us in the community, for so many people who identify as LGBTQ in sports, who looked to her as a hero because she was queer, now we're in this position where it's like, whoa, no, I can't be down with this. So I did try initially after she wrote her first anti-trans article to reach out and to say, like, have you ever talked to, somebody now playing sports? Like who's in your circle? Who are you talking to? Are you open to having a conversation? It just didn't work. So, I'm not trying to move those people. And I guess this goes back to your other question. I'm not trying to move those people who are set in stone over here. If you think about it, like, I'm not trying to think about a binary. Like I'm not with the binary, but if you think that there are people who are so set on their anti-trans, like ideas that we shouldn't exist, that we shouldn't play sports, that we don't belong in this world, those folks are going nowhere. and it's similar to maybe politics right now, right? There are people who are not moving from their position, whatever that may be. And then there are people in what we call the movable middle, right? So there are people who just don't have enough information, who are open to maybe hearing more and open to learning more, but just won't probably actively seek out those resources. They're not trying to talk to trans people online and get their information. But if it happened to cross their path, then maybe they'd be down to change their opinion. I think those are more of the people who I'm really good at speaking with and targeting, and like having those conversations to try to get them to have a little bit of change. And whether that's, people just growing in their allyship and accomplice journey, like of being more comfortable in standing up with and next to and with and for the trans community, those are the folks that I'm trying to help move a little bit more towards my side, or my position, I guess.
Well, I can tell you do a great job of it. I've taken a lot of cues from you, especially in dealing with people who may just don't know, have like bad terminology, but really are not on that other side. They're people that you can talk to, or a lot of people just don't know. Like people I've used some of your tactics on people in my own family who who have been struggling with my own transition. Mm-hmm. So the only thing I do want to touch before we get on to another subject, though, is right here in Connecticut, and a pet peeve of mine are, how did Connecticut girls high school track all of a sudden get all these fans all over the world? Because I see the same pictures of Andrea Yearwood and Terry Miller. Shout out and much love to you both. They're heading out to college over the next week. And you see those pictures, and like, as someone who, and we're going to get to this because there's something you said, you want to be the person you needed when you were younger. What's that like when you see, especially these young kids, when you see a Lindsay Haycock, who put her name on the line on the lawsuit in Idaho, for example, or an Andrea or a Terry, just being targeted and being pillared, like in the comment sections, and unflattering pictures put out there all over the net. What's that like for you to see that?
Oh, of course. It's heartbreaking. I mean, there's a big difference here. And I think now is a great time to acknowledge it, right? And I think that you and I have had this conversation on your podcast too, probably, that when you said beam up information, I was like, oh, you're talking podcast talk here.
Oh yeah, transporter room.
Yes, give it a shout out. We should pop up a little thing at the bottom too for your podcast, transporter room.
Yeah, so, put one of those up.
Yep. So, now's a good time for us to talk about just the differences in terms of privilege that I have versus, the folks that you mentioned, is because, when I transitioned, I went from being perceived as being a woman, as an androgynous woman who didn't really identify as a woman, to being perceived as a straight white man. And so in that transition, I inherited male privilege. I always have had my white privilege, but the combination of those two, along with being perceived as straight, although I very much identify as queer, it is a real combination that has allowed me access and to sort of fly under the radar in ways where trans women, and particularly trans women who are Black or brown, do not have the same opportunities to do. And so, as you mentioned, there are these photos that go around that, as athletes, I mean, Karleigh, from any race photo, you get that album of race photos, and inevitably there's one there, you're hitting the ground and everything is like, you just look awful. I have whole albums of just like, those are the ones that they're going to pick out and put in the paper. And, they're really trying to play to this idea of what a woman looks like and what a man looks like, and how athletes are supposed to look or not supposed to look. And, it's just, it's the strategies that are being used there against these athletes are so clear to me. So like the playbook, as we know, the anti-trans playbook is pretty small. It's a very short book, and we know all the tactics that they try to use. And unfortunately, it is always trans women who are the targets of those attacks. And so, for me to make Team USA 6 times is kind of like well, all right, cool. To go to the Olympic trials with men was kind of like, good job. But for Andrea and Terry to even want to participate with girls is like a national crisis, right?
Yes.
And so, it's heartbreaking. But as an athlete and as somebody who's really important to be connected to people in my community, it's been great to get to know both of them and to work with them on sharing their stories in Changing the Game documentary, which I was an executive producer of. If you haven't seen it, it's in the film festival circuit looking for distribution. So it's called Changing the Game. And just an awesome story about trans youth in sports and, really humanizing their story and getting to know them better.
And that's something I find that needs to be done a great deal.
Mm-hmm.
I got to see Changing the Game at a festival earlier this summer. And that was the biggest thing I've often told people, because like, especially training partners I have,
Mm-hmm.
I've had training partners who were dead set against it at first until they really sat down and really had a conversation and asked the real questions, not
Right.
the hearsay, not the find the Beatles science of sports questions. Yes, I've called out the transphobes, not the ADF questions, but real
Mm-hmm.
questions like what was your story?
Right.
And I tell them and then go on and say, because I say this often, you probably notice me on Twitter. Yes, once in a while I do but I always hit the trolls with this one. Do you really think we do what we do as trans people to go out and win a 10K?
Right.
Do we do it for that? No one's doing it for that.
Yeah.
But
exactly. No trans person is transitioning for athletic glory. What a trans person faces in the rest of their life would never offset a gold medal, a world championship, a high school state championship, your local 10K. No, it's just not happening. It's not happening.
I mean, I've had that happen at a race before where someone's questioned me. When someone actually walked up to a race director and says that man shouldn't be there. And then that race director says, I don't see a man there. They go on about their business. And then everyone goes, I have a rule. I went up to the person who did that and said, look, Turf, you got two choices. Shut up and race or go home, because I'm not going anywhere. And the race directors backed me up on that.
That's great.
But with that in mind, talking about humanizing the story, I want to get a little bit into your story. And actually, I want to start from that quote where you said you do this because, quote, I want to be the person I needed when I was younger. And what was that like? What was growing up like for you in the social sense and in the sports sense? How did all the pieces fit, or how didn't they fit?
I think everything fit for a while through the context of sport, right? Like, I think when we're young, we don't really understand gender except through the way of our parents and the people around us saying, like, little girls should wear pink, little boys should wear blue. You're allowed to play this. You're not allowed to play with that. Or, you can have these toys, but not these toys. These weren't made for you, right? And that's sort of how I got this understanding. And I think it helped also that I had a younger brother. So there were always, like mixed toys in the house, and I could play what I wanted to play and play with what I wanted to play with. And I think I always felt comfortable expressing myself in the way that was definitely not like my peers. It was always a little more androgynous or masculine. And, but it didn't become a problem until puberty, right? Until like people started to be like, oh, your tomboy thing isn't really cute anymore, right? I played baseball, softball, and then volleyball, basketball, and softball in high school, and was a 3-sport all-conference athlete. So my identity was really in sports, and I think that was a place where it's safe for young girls to be more masculine by comparison to their non-sport playing peers. It's really interesting if we want to unpack that we sort of assign masculinity to playing sports, no matter who it is playing them, right? And so, like, it was a safe place for me as a tomboy to be, and really where I found my friends and my community. And I wouldn't say that I had a hard time outside of sports, but it was definitely through sports that I made those friends. And so, sport was just a huge part of my growing up. It was a place that I felt safe, even if I didn't feel safe in other spaces in my life. So I think that's what really attracted me to continuing to play. And I played everything that I could. 2nd degree black belt in karate. I did like all the extracurricular activities that I could, just to try to find and replicate that safe space of sport.
That sounds like in a sense, that sounds like a very common it seems to be a common occurrence for us. That seems to be an ongoing theme, is that we want to achieve, we want to overachieve, because I mean, and in some ways my upbringing was similar to yours, very Midwestern. Sports was an option. Sports for me was a place to hide. And especially being in the Midwest, where that demarcation of boys are this, girls are this, is a lot more bluntly stated, and it's a lot more out there, it seems.
Yep. Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I was in a suburb in the Midwest, and that was definitely my take on that too. And I think that the overachieving part is really interesting too. And I think that's not just for trans people, but for a lot of lesbian, bisexual, gay, queer people. I think that we try to, many that I know have tried to compensate for or cover our insecurity about our identities by being, such a good athlete or such a good, pianist or whatever it is, musician, that you can't not like me, right? Like that it would make up for my transness or my queerness. And so I definitely found that it was not just in sports that I kind of went all in. It was every extracurricular activity. It was the school newspaper and the radio station and volunteering and doing clubs and organizations as much as I could to try to make friends, to have community, like that built-in association, and to also, I mean, I think I did so much because I didn't want to have super close friends, right? I didn't want just one friend group. I didn't want like two best friends. I was afraid to make those deep connections with people. So I just did a little bit of everything so that everybody kind of knew me and most people liked me, but they never really know me very well.
Now, another quote I want to throw at you, because in researching for this, I found out we have a lot in common, actually. And it sounds like very, very similar, like coming of age, growing up stories. We had similar college mascots. We were both Wildcats.
Okay.
Me at Northwestern, you at Northern Michigan. At Northern Michigan, it seemed you had a mantra. Busy meant safe.
Busy did mean safe, yep. Yeah, it was very much
how busy were you?
Oh, I mean, really, it's exactly that same thing that I was talking about of being so involved in everything. The newspaper kind of became my core group because I wasn't playing sports. I decided that I didn't want to play women's basketball because I didn't identify as a woman, and I didn't understand that was the piece of it. But I didn't feel comfortable being associated with on a women's team. But I did intramural sports. I did the newspaper. I did the radio station. I had multiple jobs in the town. I really just stayed as busy as I could because of that exact thing. Like if I'm a social butterfly, I kind of buzz in, buzz out. And, it's like we can have a pleasant, short interaction and you can be like, oh, Chris is nice, but not really know me very well. And I think there was a lot about myself that I didn't know myself. Because busy also meant that I didn't have to think about my own identity. Busy meant safe, like, other people didn't know me, but it also meant I didn't really have to know myself. And so that's part of that safety piece.
Now, what got you back into sport and the sport you're doing now? What got you into multi-eventing?
Yeah, I think first I really missed how I felt when I was in sport. I used sport, even though I wasn't doing team sports in college and after college, I was using sport as a way to sort of, I would almost say, manipulate my body, right? So like, I thought if I run more, maybe I'll slim down here. I can lift weights and get a little more muscle here. Maybe, people will start to say he more than they say she, because I was always kind of riding that line in the center. And so, that was one way that drew me back to sport. And then, the other thing was that when I was in my last year of school, I had 2 mini strokes. And so I wasn't running, wasn't doing anything. And sort of in my recovery from the mini strokes said, like, I want to do the Chicago Marathon. And I had never done a marathon. And that was sort of my goal. So I worked my way up running 5K, 10K, half marathon, ultra marathon. And then thought, what's the next thing that I can do to see, to push my body? And it was buy a bike, teach myself how to swim, and try to become a triathlete. And so that was my entry point to triathlon, was basically that I didn't want to run longer than 100K.
See, I had that similar progression, but I don't know about that ultra thing. No,
Yeah.
even though one of our members here likes doing some of that, I'm like, I don't know about Western States 100. No.
Yeah. I think it'd be fun.
it would be fun, but I know how my body feels right now after a good half marathon. I'm just like, no. But for you got there. In many ways, you've gotten there. You've done an Ironman. In fact, I thought about that. I think about that because I remember the first time that I heard you speak live. And you told the story about when you finished an Ironman and you had this great achievement.
Yeah.
And you were misgendered at the end of 140.6 miles.
I was. Yeah, it was heartbreaking. Where was it the first time that you heard me speak? Was it at the conference?
Actually, the first time I heard you speak, you spoke at ESPN.
Oh, and you were there. That's a while ago.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's been about. I mean, that was a while back. That was like 7 or 8 years back. Yeah. But I remember vividly hearing your voice in that story and talking about how you had this great moment, and then you heard, "Congratulations, you're an Iron Woman," and it went like, pfft, and I saw your face fall, and I must say that moment impacted my own transition.
Really?
In
what ways?
In the sense that I got the feeling from you that, in a sense, that was your moment of being sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Mm-hmm.
That was straw meet camel's back moment. And it was maybe a year after that I hit my wall.
Yeah.
And I remember those words. And I remember the facial expression you had.
Yeah. That's amazing, Karleigh. Thanks for sharing that with me. You know, that story is so interesting too, because it was my first race as male. And it was it was such a big deal to me because I had just started testosterone. I had just had top surgery. So it was my first time running outside without a shirt on, like from the wetsuit to the transition area, using the men's transition tents. You know, it was a new experience for me all around. Plus it was my first Ironman race. And, you know, I was thinking I was so motivated by being trans in that race. It was really interesting because I didn't know any trans people who had done an Ironman race before. I don't think that I was the first, but I just didn't know anybody. You know, in the times when it was hard, I thought, you know, I volunteered for this. I signed up for this. I paid a lot of money to do this race. And, you know, what I'm facing right now, being a trans person, is way harder than running the last 10K of this race. And that was really what got me to that finish line. And the Met volunteer said, "Congratulations, you are an Iron Woman." And I, you know, like, just like, exactly like you said, just I everything that I thought that moment would be, it was not. And I gave myself, I think the positive part of the story is that I really just gave myself 2 minutes to be really pissed about it. And I was like, I'm not going to let this ruin my experience. I mean, all of those months of training, all of those hours of racing, and the pride and accomplishment that finishing an Ironman race is, you know, I'm not going to let one volunteer ruin that for me, because that's not a problem with me. That's a problem with that person, right? I have no control over how that person sees me. And I also don't need to care. I'm never going to see that person again. You know, I think that was probably one of the first moments that I had that substantial shift in my perspective. And I think it was just because I was so exhausted. I literally did not have the energy to care what this guy thought about me. So
now, when you compete now,
mm-hmm.
how much of transness factors into your mindset now as an athlete? Because there are some athletes who say, I don't think about being trans when I'm out there, when I'm doing a race. For myself, I don't. I always kind of have this feeling that I don't shout it from the rooftops. I don't necessarily advertise it, but I don't hide it either. Like, for example, I did the handlebars on my bike behind me in a trans flag pattern, because that's my subtle way of saying, here's who I am. For you, how do you kind of balance that out for yourself when you're competing?
I think I go in and out of thinking about it. As an athlete, there are these moments where you really are feeling flow, right? Like if you're running, you're only thinking about your breathing and your posture and your footsteps and making it to the next aid station, right? Like, I'm thinking more about my form on the bicycle than thinking about, being trans. But there are definitely moments at the beginning of a race when I'm preparing, like getting to the starting line and standing there at the starting line, where, I think I still have these moments of trying to acknowledge my sense of belonging in the tri community, because it is a sport where, now more, I'm super happy that since I came out in 2010, I know a lot of trans triathletes now. I know a lot of trans people in multisport. And I think it's great that they feel empowered to be themselves and to be seen, right? So that we can see each other. But when I'm in the race, I think I go in and out of thinking about it, because it is important to me. My identity is really important to me. And like, you see my shirt, it's my brand. It's like who I am. It's who I'm fighting for. And there is a part of every time I race, I'm racing not just for me, but I'm racing for my community. I'm racing for young trans people. I'm racing for trans people everywhere to have equal rights and to have access and to be able to feel empowered to do what they love and not compromise their identities. That's why I'm racing. And so it's important to me. Like, I've never waved a trans flag at a race. I don't even think I've had a trans, like, anything on me aside from maybe a shirt. And that's actually just recent. But, in every article written about me, in every feature, in every, video, I'm talking about it and I'm living it. And so I think that's it. I'm balancing that constantly. Like, I'm balancing trying to achieve personally for my athletic results, and also, be a role model for people and be an example, a possibility model for every other person out there, whether they love sports, or they love theater, or they love writing, or whatever it is that they love, that they can do that and be themselves.
Now, with that in mind, you started transathlete.com in 2013, if I have that right?
That's right.
Is it, how much of what you just described pushed you to that direction? Like, I've got to start this clearinghouse. I have to put something out there.
Yeah, all of it. And it was really that first experience that I talked about when when I was trying to transition, I was outing myself to people and there were no policies that I could find. And I just thought, what would have made this easier if there was something I could go to that says, like, here are the rules. Here's what you need to do. And then I would know, like, do I qualify or do I not qualify? For me, that's how it started. And then it was a great opportunity, transathlete.com, to use policies to show other states and other high school state athletic associations, show other organizations, national governing bodies, that it is possible to have inclusive policies, and to that they can make their policies better. So I could take a great state policy for high schoolers and then go to a state that has no policy and say, hey, it's been going really well in these two states. These are model policies that you could use. Let me help you write this. And so fortunately, I've had the opportunity to write professional sports league policies, national governing body policies, high school state association policies, to try to make things better for trans people.
What are some of the policies you've helped to write?
National Women's Sports League, National Women's Hockey League, National Women's Hockey League is the first professional sports league that had a trans policy, and it is inclusive policy, which is awesome, for women's hockey. That was a great one. Hockey has been one of the sports, actually, that's been really involved, which has been great. I'm working on a professional sports policy right now. And I also work closely with the NCAA on hopefully updating their policies soon as well. And then there are a number of colleges that I've helped to consult with to make sure that they had appropriate wording. And, now I think it's a big thing of working towards talking about non-binary athletes as well, and making sure that any policy that's talking about trans athletes is also providing space for non-binary people to also play sports.
Now, something from your own history I want to touch on.
Hmm.
And I want to just get the emotion and the feeling of this.
All right.
When you went, no, this is a good one because we had to touch on that unfortunate Iron Man incident. We got to get something
Yep.
good in here to wash the palate.
Yep.
And for me, myself, also as a person who loves the duathlon, because I look like a wounded whale when I swim, was seeing Mosier USA and seeing you with the triathlon outfit, with the triathlon singlet, with the 3-letter code on it, and you made a national team. What feelings does that bring up for you? Take me back to that first national team you made.
You could see it, right? Like, I think it's really incredible. There are very few times I've been speechless in my life, and that was definitely one of them. Was getting that uniform in the mail and holding it up and being like, wow, this is real. You know, this is the dream that so many athletes have. And it's awesome. I have actually on my wall, I have the receipt from that first match, the first competition. So I'm just going to grab it. Hold on. So when you are at a race, they have this little ticket counter. You know all this, Karleigh, but I'm just going to explain.
Yeah.
Where they print out at the end of the race, they print out your results, and you can see. And I knew what place I had to get to make Team USA, and so I have it framed here with my national championship results. Just sort of as motivation. You know, it wasn't the final results, it was like the preliminary results, but this was the moment, and this is what I got. And I remember walking, you know, as far away from everybody else as I could, thinking like I was very close to making it. I knew it was going to be close, and you know, looking at this and thinking like it actually happened. Like, it's an amazing moment when your dream comes true. And you know that it didn't just come true out of luck, but from all of the, you know, the months and years of hard work and sacrifice that goes into that. So yeah, just incredible. Chris,
did you ever think you were going to get this far? Did you think that the team would accept you? Did you think about all this and that? And I thought of the answer you gave throughout the entire Nike commercial. I didn't.
No,
I want to talk about, did you even see the Nike thing coming? Did you even see that coming?
I manifested that. I'll say I wanted that. And I think I wanted it not just for myself as an athlete of like, what a cool thing, right? Like, this is the dream for so many of us when we're kids. But also, again, going back to what would it mean to me as a young person to have seen someone like me in a Nike ad, in a Nike commercial, on a billboard in the center of San Francisco, or in the store in New York, right? You know, just to know that my representation can give possibility to so many people. And I wanted that badly. And so I really put that out in the universe. So I did see that coming. I wanted that.
So this is something that you thought about. Hey, wouldn't it be cool to be in a Nike ad? And then here you are, 2016 during the Rio Olympics. You're in a Nike ad. I remember seeing that ad, and that made me go out and actually jump on my bike and do 30 miles.
That's awesome.
Because that was just fun. No, because it was a fire up moment. I mean, for so many of us to see that, no, here's somebody who is trans and is on Team U and gets that 3-letter code next to his name. I mean, do you think that was equal to seeing Chris Mosier M and your age group next to you in a result? Did it kind of equal that? Did it surpass that? Is it kind of the same system?
I think it surpassed it, to be honest, because the scale is just so much larger. You know, it's definitely not about external validation, and you know, there's a lot of validation that comes with being a Nike athlete, with being, you know, with having a commercial or having the blue check by your name on social media or whatever. There's certainly perks to all of that, right? But like when I saw M on my driver's license, I thought, oh, finally. You know, it didn't feel like a major accomplishment. It just felt like things were finally right. After all this time, they just finally fixed what was wrong, right? But when I got the Team USA uniform, when I got a Nike sponsorship and was in the ads, that to me, like the scale of that, the reach of my message is just so amplified. And that's what's really meaningful to me.
Now, today, athlete, activist, pitchman, spouse, you're doing a lot of stuff. By the way, love your spouse's site and some of the things that they're doing. They're doing with photography and with art. It's awesome. I checked it out. What's the next big thing for you?
Big thing for me. It's really, we're at such an interesting moment in history, aren't we? Like, races aren't really on the schedule right now. And I would say like the next big thing is world championship race next year, and potentially trying to make back to the Olympic trials if they do the Olympic trials again. And that is undetermined about what that sport will do for 2021. So those are two options, and clearly sport is still central to my work. But what I think right now is super important is just being out there, speaking to people and sharing the message about inclusion in sports. And now we're at this point where, last year, 20 plus states had anti-trans bills on the table. And I said the only benefit of COVID was my knee being fixed, but really, I think one of the benefits of this time period right now, there are very few, so I'm really looking for silver linings, is that, the legislative sessions got shut down early, and a lot of these horrible anti-trans bills targeting young people did not have the opportunity to make it through. But we know that this presidential election is so critically important, and we know that the next legislative session that we have, more and more of these are going to pop back up because our identities are, questionable to people. They are a point of debate. And I think that my next fight as an activist is just really making sure that I'm protecting trans youth and really speaking out about these policies and just trying to do the most good in those areas.
Now, with that in mind, let's take this a little bit of time we have left and actually ponder, what will sports in relation to gender look like in the future, you think? Where does the conversation go next? And what are some ways perhaps we could organize sport, for example, so that non-binary athletes are not excluded, but are included? What are some of the possibilities of where we could go next?
Yeah, like I said, I'm working on policies that are including non-binary people. And, one thing about sport policies is that a lot of them, at least at the higher levels, the more elite levels of sport, are based on hormones. And so I think there's going to be a shift in what that looks like. People are always like, some of the trolls that come to my page are always like, why don't you have your own category? Why don't you just compete with other transgender people? And I don't think that that's the wave of the future. I don't think that there's going to be a mass rush of trans athletes who want to compete in trans-only leagues. I don't see that happening. But I do think that we're really going to have to reevaluate our notions of gender and about the binary to open up our definitions. And the biggest thing, I think, if I can do one thing, it would be to help people understand that trans women are women who were assigned male at birth, right? Like trans women are women, period. And to really help people understand that trans women belong in women's sports, and to help people with their understanding and education around trans identity.
Oh, that's one thing. I want your take on this. Transphobia and misogyny go hand in hand, because it just really seems it does. Why? I mean, in your mind, give me the male perspective on that. Where is that coming from, and how does that hit you? How does it hit you knowing that when the other side and these groups make all these posters and they demonize people, you are never mentioned.
No.
Peanut Manuel never mentioned.
No.
Verity Smith never mentioned. But for example, most recently I found out I got mentioned in one of those things.
Oh, congratulations.
It's an honor I'd pass on, honestly.
Yeah. So, I think it's just, if you look back at it, this is embedded in the history of sports because sport is, rooted in patriarchy, and it's rooted in male domination. And what the issue really is here is that aside from people not seeing us for who we really are, that when we look at sports, when people are talking about people who are underperforming, or they're talking trash about another player or team, they're using homophobic and transphobic terms. And a lot of times they're using sexist terms. And that's the point at which we see it all wrapped up, right? There's an automatic understanding or assumption that playing like a girl, catching like a girl, throwing like a girl is a bad thing, which implies or assumes a domination by anyone assigned male at birth being bigger, faster, stronger, better than someone assigned female at birth. And so, the problem in this argument is not, it's not about our ability. It's not about our size, really. It's not about our strength or our, athletic capability. It's that they're not seeing us as who we are. So when you're being targeted, people don't know how fast you are, how strong you are. They don't know how that's changed in the course of your life. They also don't know how much training you're doing every single day. And none of that is accounted for. And it is, never, if you won a race, Karleigh, no one would ever say it's because you worked your ass off. They'd say it's because you're trans, right? Mm-hmm. And so so there's this automatic assumption about who we are and our abilities based on who we are assigned at birth, or what we are assigned at birth. And I think that's really what it comes down to, is that people don't see me as a threat because they see me as a woman, right? Or they don't see me at all, right? I mean, nobody has called me a woman in a very long time, but, and particularly in sports, but they're not seeing me as a threat to them, right? Whereas it's about being a threat in sports, which is absolutely ridiculous, but that's what I've seen to be the root of it. It doesn't matter if it's a high school cross country athlete or track athlete, right? That if you were assigned male at birth, they think that you are a threat to other players.
One thing I do want to know, let's say 2021, maybe even 2022, USA Triathlon National Duathlon Championships. And I plan on being there.
Okay.
To compete.
Yep.
I'm getting my bike together in transition, and all of a sudden I look up and I see red, white, and blue uniform, probably some very nice tri bike going through, aero helmet, setting up in transition, and I see on the back Mosier USA.
I hope it's
will this scene, and it is you. Will this scene happen? Will we see you in duathlon again?
Yes, I think that you will. And actually, I've got my bike set up right over here. I just started riding again because the Tour de France is on, and this is like my most motivated time to ride my bike. I think so. And multisport is a love of mine. I just joined the USA Triathlon Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. So I'm joined a team of other athletes to help provide feedback to USA Triathlon to make sure that they're making progress, not just in trans inclusion, but in being more racially diverse. You know that triathlon is a very, very white sport.
No, you think?
Yeah, right. and also to get more gender equity and to make sure that there's more LGBTQ conversations happening in triathlon, and to really just help them expand their understanding about what it means to be an inclusive community. So I'm really excited to do that work with them. And multisport will always be a true love of mine. The thing about being an athlete and like just loving to do it so much is that there are a lot of things that I want to do. I would love to do Western states. I would love to ride my bike across the country. I would love to go back to the US Olympic trials for race walking. I would love to go back and do more duathlons and tries. And, I join you in the swimming component, which is why we are duathletes. But it's so fun, doing an aqua bike or doing any of those multi-sport events are just a lot of fun. So you'll see me back out there.
Well, let me just put it this way. Let me know your race schedule next year, because I want to be at a race where you are, just so I can say I competed in the same race with Chris Mosier. I finished I finished 2 hours behind him, but I was in the same race. To end
would
it up,
love that.
I
Yeah.
want to give you the mic for a couple of minutes. And with this in mind, what is among anything else, what's the one thing that people who may be in that movable middle need to know about trans athletes and transgender people in general?
I think one important thing is that I'm a case study of one, so I can only speak on behalf of myself as much as I try to be a representation of my community. Each of us are individuals. And I think it's really important that people remember that just as there's not just one way to be a man, and there's not just one way to be a woman, there's not just one way to be a trans person either. And each of our stories are different. They're complex. We are intersectional beings. We are not just transgender people. We are athletes and parents and brothers and sisters and on and on and on. We have jobs, we have homes, we have lives, we have pets, we have friends, we have a full life around us. And so it's really important that people remember that, because a lot of times it is boiled down to our identity, and we are attacked because of our identity, and people forget that we are humans and we are people. And while they may feel empowered on the other side of a screen to say some really horrible stuff on Instagram or on Twitter, I'm a person and you are a person, and there's a shared humanity there that I think people forget. I often find that they remember that when we talk, when we have a conversation, when I approach them with kindness and respect, even if they don't approach me with kindness and respect. And so one thing that I would just say to everybody is, you don't know what you don't know. And the difference is that when you know, you need to do better, right? And once you learn, you have to do better. And it's really important that we be not so attached to being right, but to be open to learning more. And I think going back to my approach, it's really just being open to hearing other people's perspectives. I'm so curious what the people who have strong opinions think, because I want to know their perspective. I want to know what I can maybe talk about that will help them change. So you don't know what you don't know, and then be open to learning more. And I think that's the biggest key. And anybody wants like these educational nuggets can go to my Instagram. I post a lot of stuff there in terms of learning terminology and learning concepts. So that's a great place to start. And then my website, transathlete.com, if you are interested in learning more about the policies and what you can do to help support transgender athletes in your area and with the lawsuits that are happening and whatnot.
Those are some good words. Again, transathlete.com. It's an excellent resource. Chris's Instagram, it's an excellent resource, especially if you're trying to get in shape. That's what I'm trying to do. That's always good to get some tips from a high-end athlete. And some wise words to end on. Chris, it has been an honor having you in our forum tonight. And
Thanks so much.
I can say also, as an athlete, you are an inspiration. You are a person. Your example is what pushes me out the door when I'm like, I really don't feel like it. I just want cheesecake. So keep doing you, keep being you, and keep competing. Thank you for being with us tonight. Yes, I'm fangirling.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
Yes, and thank all of you for showing up tonight. And just a reminder, if you like what you saw tonight, if you want to see more of it, if you like the programming that you've been seeing throughout, not just tonight, but throughout these last, especially in the middle of the COVID crisis, and you like seeing more of it. And if you're not a New Haven Pride Center member, maybe you should consider joining. Go to our Facebook page for more information, or go to our website for more information. By the way, Patrick, put up the website real quick. Yes, for our donations, newhavenpridecenter.org/donate. And while you're at it, newhavenpridecenter.org. If you're not a member, consider becoming one, and keep fine programming like this coming to our LGBTQ community across New Haven and across Connecticut. That was our night with Chris Mosier. And thanks again, Chris, for showing up. And thank you all for being here. I'm Karleigh Webb for all of us at New Haven Pride Center.